typically the webinars are probably about an hour. They're 2 hours and usually about an hour and 15, 20 minutes of learning and education, various topics, which we extract predominantly from our course, How to Buy a Good Business at a Great Price. But we go over that, and most of the people who join the webinar are people that follow our program. But then we try to get a 45-minute Q&A on the content itself. And after the last couple of webinars, it was like they wanted to extend the Q&A portion. So that's the genesis for how this arrived. So we won't do the learning portion, but it's totally open. You can share with us anything that you'd like. One of the things to keep in mind is for if you're talking about any deals that you're currently working on, my clients know that are on this call, I'm bound by your NDA as an advisor. However, if you're not one of our clients, for example, and if you've signed an NDA, just keep the information very generic. Obviously no name of a business, location, etc. If it's something you want to talk about a category, but just for the protection of sellers, to not have anything that could divulge who they are specifically. If that makes sense. So I do this all day long with clients. A lot of it is via email, some of it by call. They're always very productive and very helpful. As I mentioned, as part of our course that we've had around for 20 years, constantly updated, we provide free consulting for our clients. So anything and everything throughout the process, they email me, and Manoj and I speak all the time, and they email us with questions, and where necessary, we get on a call, because sometimes you get into the throes of a deal and it's a little more complicated. And in those particular situations, I get onto a call with people. And just to reiterate, we never charge anyone. That's probably one of the greatest value. And I'm hoping after today's call, you'll want to join our regular community, and you'll see the value, and that'll be great to have you. As far as the webinars are concerned, we typically try to do them every 2 weeks, make sure everybody gets notified. Irene probably can't make it. So she said we always have the recordings available after, usually within a couple of days, 2-3 days. We post them on YouTube, so you can see them on our YouTube channel. And also, to join or register for any of the webinars, all you need to do is go to richardparker.com, and usually the top banner of the website, it'll change, we'll give you the link to register for the webinars, and see is always already posted in the links for you to join. Additionally, everybody, I believe, has the link for the YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel. I know Irene has it, and I believe Scott's pretty new here. I didn't see him before, so nice to have you join us. And so that's it's Richard Parker Diomo on YouTube, right, Sia?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect. So I'm hoping to have these Q&A has become a regular session for our clients and for others that want to join us. So today, whatever you want to discuss about your current deals, you're open to discuss them. And I'm happy to provide as much feedback as possible. Feel free to ask me anything. The laundry list of things that I do not know is really, really long. But when it comes to buying a business, and I like to think I'm a reasonably humble guy, I will put my 34 years of knowledge up against anybody in the universe. And the only thing that I could promise that I will give you is straightforward, real world, practical advice. I don't teach people how to buy businesses that are cash flowing $500,000 and buy them for no money down and close deals in 12 days, like you see some of these con artists online doing. I don't do any of that. I deal in the real world, and so I'm very confident the information you can get back from me, you'll find you can put to use immediately. I also have a bunch of questions that were submitted to me from clients that couldn't join today. So if we run out of questions, I'll go through some of those. I talked about it earlier. Some of you weren't on the call. Remember, if any of you are talking about any particular deals, more than welcome to talk about them. Remember, you more than likely signed an NDA, and so keep the information very generic. And if there's anything subsequent to this call that you want to talk about more confidentially, my email address we posted at the end, and feel free to email me at any time. So we can open it up. You do it by hand raise. Anybody, burning questions, whatever you'd like to cover, we're happy to cover off. So feel free, raise your hands, and someone's got to jump in and start first. Not all at once now. Come on.
Do you want me to go? I'll go if that's okay. Just a gentle one to begin with. It's just a generic question, Richard, and everybody else. Good evening, by the way. From your experience, how do you manage the deal flow? I've got the problem of having too much. I know that I've got my 10 commandments, which I stick to religiously. Pardon the pun.
Pardon the pun. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just, I wouldn't say, I'm just getting a little bit anxious and struggling with too much deal flow and then saying, right, that's in the bin pile and that's what I need to concentrate. So any tips around that would be really helpful at the moment. As you know, we've been talking recently and I've got quite a few that you've been looking at for me. So, but I'm getting more and more and I just need a way to manage it better.
So the first thing is at the beginning of this process, it's very common and normal, and you want to be hopeful that that's a problem, because it's not a problem. I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity, because by and large, most people from Main Street to Wall Street, deal flow is always the challenge. And so having an abundance of deals is wonderful, but managing them until you've got to work to get to the point to be able to identify your 5 golden rules that a business has in place, and learn to say fast no's. You want to say slow maybes and fast no's. So if it doesn't meet your criteria, it's don't unless you're at the beginning of the process where this is really learning and you're trying to learn about a bunch of different businesses and categories and what drives those businesses, that's fine at the beginning, but you've got to weed those down quickly. And so, for example, you and I have been talking about a lot of e-commerce businesses. And one of the things, for example, that I've noticed repeatedly is a lot of these businesses are operational for less than 2-3 years. And there's been a number of those. So for me, if I'm sitting in your shoes, you'll form your own rules. But to me, in an e-commerce business that jumped up like this, may have taken, from the get-go, had a great start, might have done so because they took advantage of an emerging technology. And you need some time to see if that technology is going to stay around. So you see a lot of businesses ramp up quickly, but I would have a golden rule. Look, if they haven't been in business for 3 to 4 years, I would rule them out. And I'm not saying that for other businesses, because I bought businesses that are business for less, brick and mortars, but I would put that as a rule. So if you get one of those, and especially at the stage of the year, I would bang those out right away. So to me, the best advice would be learn to say fast no's. Because if not, you end up, you know the space, you know what type you want to buy already. Your golden rules should be in place. If it doesn't pass it immediately, don't try to turn a business into something that it's not. And then on that first call with the seller, broker, owner, go through your critical questions that you've been able to assemble based on your experience with these type of businesses. Go through them quickly. And if it doesn't meet it, gone. Fast no's.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Brilliant.
Sure.
Manoj, may I ask a follow-up question? I hope I pronounced your name correctly, but what methods are you using to be in a scenario where you're getting too much deal flow?
Well, sure. Basically, no, that's fine. I'm using a combination. I'm using a combination of majority of brokers, but I'm based in the UK and US brokers. However, what I'm finding is as we know, Richard's talked about a lot, there's pros and cons of sourcing, and there's pros and cons of both. But I'm also using some boutique off-market brokers that deal with off-market stuff only, and they don't charge. It's like my secret sauce. So, and that's taken me a lot of time, a lot of weeks and months to find them. It hasn't happened overnight. It's a lot of painstaking work and research. And like Richard said, separate the wheat from the chaff and get to a point where, but I think what I've learned, I've been in this process now for a few months. And as Richard says, once the more you do it, it actually does get a little bit easier. Now I'm still trying to play catch up, but I am finding now with Richard's mentorship and coaching and also my own little bit of experience to say, right, I'm getting quicker to say no's. Like today, it was a great example. I got really excited about a business been in business for 12 years. And I thought, oh, Richard would like this too. And then I did some reputation management on it, and it was a straight no within 30 seconds. So, yeah. So
We had Irene.
Hope that's helped.
And it's a great answer, Manoj, and I appreciate it. And then there was to expand.
No, you're welcome.
If you go back and look at the first webinar that we did about buying the right business and deal flow, one of the Jacob Van Hoof, who's usually on these calls, he's actually going to see a business. He's actually, I think, let's see what time it is. Yeah, I think he's in the meeting right now. Because he called me earlier to do a little bit of prep. He started doing a direct solicitation, which is a weeding out process. You want it to be highly focused. And he said, and we've had all over the point our results from clients. So it's all over the map. Like our results from direct solicitations have been from 0 to 40%. Crazy. But he had his first go round that he sent out a bunch of letters so far in the first 10 days or so, because I think it was on the last webinar. He said 4% return on the number of inquiries he said, and they were all sounded like highly motivated people. Like they were, yeah, we're seriously thinking about that. So you want to get to that direct solicitation, but a lot of it is, you don't want to have spray and pray, but it's a very big pie at the beginning, if you will. And then you ultimately narrow it down. But Minaj, one advantage that he has is he's also knows the category, like of e-commerce or whatever. So that's helpful. But it's like what do I say? Kissing a lot of frogs, right? You've just got to get the word out to as many people as possible. But it's beautiful to hear you have too much deal flow. Yes.
Hey, this is Troy. Good to see you again. I have a quick question from Minaj. What did he mean by the boutique brokers and they don't charge? What does he mean by that?
You can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
No, we heard you. We can hear. We couldn't hear Minaj's answer.
All right. Can you hear? Sorry, I put myself on mute because I was listening to you. So apologies. Basically, my research has shown that we've got, everyone knows we've got national brokers both around the globally here in the UK and the US, which everybody knows about. However, through my research, accidentally, I found brokers that have specific relationships with the sellers, and some of them are free, but some of them, it's like a very minimal fee. It's like $50, something, quite cheap, where you can get access to sellers directly, believe it or not. And some of these boutique brokers in specific niches, some of them are e-commerce, some of them more general, will allow you to speak to the seller direct as well. So that's what I mean by boutique. So look for something. I always believe that it's do the opposite of what everybody else is doing. But like I said, this has taken me months, and I came across it accidentally. Right. It's how I found it.
Troy, just as an additional FYI, you do get a lot of brokers in the lower market that won't put their business on the publicly listed businesses for sale website because it's for them, this is a real good nugget. They know they're going to sell this. And this is especially common in areas where brokers co-broke. There's about 17 or 18 states in America where brokers share listings similar to what they do in real estate. But it's quite common, and it's not always approved by their broker association, but it's quite common in some of those. A good broker knows what a good business is, and oftentimes they want to keep that to themselves because they have a buyer pool, and they don't want to co-broke. They don't want to split commission. Okay, that's really the underpinning theory behind it. So with these brokers, that's where I find buyers make terrible mistakes. You have a communication with the broker, they send you a listing, you decide it's not for you, and that's your end of your communication with the broker, which is the wrong approach, because the first thing is, if you're not interested, you should let them know. We talked about this previously. It's most brokers, and I know for me, when I do my intermediary work, I find it actually offensive when I've had a bunch of conversations going back and forth with an individual. They have the NDA, they've got the deck, we've had some conversations, maybe they've even had a conversation with the seller as well, and then they disappear. And I'll follow up and I find out, oh, sorry, we decided otherwise. Well, you should have the common courtesy to tell the people that's the way you conduct business. But it's especially important related to brokers. You want to let them know and periodically touch base with them, because if they put you in that pool of good buyers, you'll see those deals that the market won't see. Not all of them have them, but a lot of them do.
Minaj, I was just wondering, I haven't heard of the off-market boutiques before, so it's super interesting. How would you go about finding them? Like, is there a name that they use, a naming convention? Just because I haven't come across it before.
Okay, so off-market deals are typically going to be done because they're off-market deals. Obviously, they're not made public, and so you have to approach them directly. And the way you do that is through a vetting process, meaning once you get through, and again, I don't want to keep referring back to prior webinars, but we covered this in Deal Flow extensively, which you should watch because I think it'll be very helpful. Conceptually, what the idea is, you look at when you go into this process, you don't even know what type of business is right for you. You don't know what type of business you want to buy. So you use the public business for sale websites as your laboratory, and you pick 4 categories that you think you're interested in, and you get 5 sellers. Doesn't even matter if the business has no interest to you, because you're on a fact-finding mission. And then if you take 5 sellers within 4 categories, you suddenly have a sample size of 20 businesses. And when you go meet with those particular sellers, you'll be able to hone down pretty quickly whether or not your skill set matches that business. If it doesn't, you drop 2 categories, you add 2 more, and you rinse and repeat. But the goal is to get to 1 or 2 categories, preferably 1 over a period of time, where you know this is the category of business that I want to buy. It may be in home services, and it could be HVAC. It may be in B2B services, and it may be commercial cleaning. It may be alarms or pest control or distribution or manufacturing of small parts or whatever that may be. Once you have that identified, then you could get a list broker and you do a direct solicitation to those businesses in the geography that you want to target. And we have in the material the exact letter that you should use, which is one of the things that we found enormous success from. I mean, the big difference is you can send out these letters and you'll get some responses. You may get good. Like I said, we've had them all over the place. But if you take those letters and you get an attorney friend or colleague or your actual attorney, and you have them send out the letter for you on their letterhead, no labels, each one typed out, proper stamp from their law office. Because one thing, business owners are besieged with inquiries by email and brokers and individuals about selling their businesses, and they throw these all into the garbage. But everybody opens a lawyer's letter. So if you have a friend who's an attorney, you just say, could you do me a favor and print this on my letterhead? And even in our template letter, it explains that you're not asking the attorney to do your follow-up. But that template letter has, in many cases, has been miraculous, like ridiculous returns. But the whole thing, Francesca, is getting it, weeded down to a category. Because if you have 5 or 6 categories that you're interested in a certain geographical area, you don't want to send out 3,000 letters.
Yeah, I understand that. I hadn't heard the lawyer project. I'm also based out of the UK. I hadn't heard that being used in the UK before, so that's interesting. But
it's only used here amongst ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, great. Okay, super. Thank you.
Oh, of course. I'm glad you could join. Who's up next on the Scott? You do exit planning?
Yeah, I do. I'm relatively new to the industry. I've done 6 exits myself in private industry, and just my last career play, I want to get involved with as a exit planning advisor, and picked up a couple certifications and just opened my doors in February. So yeah, I've tried to coach my clients on how to view their business through the eyes of a prospective buyer. So I'm gleaning all the information from you buyers.
Great. Well, I know, like, for my intermediary work, it was always a massive advantage to understand the business through the lens of a buyer, which was predominantly what I did. And I'm doing M&A for decades. So if I could provide you with any help or help you with your career, or you want to bounce some ideas around, because it's there's a lot of competitors for what you're doing, but the good guys really do well, good guys and gals. But if ever you want to jump on a call, and if you have any questions as you're navigating your way through, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Happy to help.
I certainly appreciate that, and we'll plan to do so.
Great. Okay.
Sorry, Richard, can I just come back to the lawyer letters very briefly? The cost, this is sounding like a real schoolboy question, but when I approach the lawyers, because I've actually got a lawyer friend, the cost of the ink and the paper and the postage, I just work an agreement with my solicitor friend. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always suggested, get nice linen paper.
Yeah.
Get nice linen envelopes that match. Okay. And then they will be able to print the letter inexpensively. And also the letters can be done, for the label, and they'll use their, ask them if they could use their envelope, because it'll have their logo on it. And if they don't, you could do your own, but ultimately their envelope and their stationery, you could just reimburse them the cost. I've done it both ways. Ones where I've reimbursed the cost, and it's really negligible, the price of paper. And it just makes for a much nicer appearance.
Perfect. Thank you. Cheers.
No problem. And Troy, you had a question. Sorry. I think he's still there. There he goes.
Hey,
Go ahead.
yeah, hey, Richard. Yeah, I'm sorry I'm not on camera because I'm driving. But anyway, thanks for getting back with me. I wanted to ask again about kind of going back, but boutique. How do you? First of all, what's the definition of a boutique brokerage, and how do you specifically find them? I mean, you can find brokerage, but how do you find the ones that are boutique?
Okay, so let me tell you it's interesting. So when I say it's interesting, is I do intermediary work. And, in some cases, an investment banker boutique firm is like business broker on steroids, or just a fancier term for a business broker. It really gets separated by the size of the deals that they do, whether they're called business brokers, investment bankers, or boutique investment banker. For how Minaj sees it in the UK, where you would see it here in the US would be either brokers that are doing larger deals or investment bankers that are doing smaller deals, right where right where they intersect. Because when they say about boutique investment banking or boutique brokerage, it's typically the meaning is supposed to be around the idea of they're not a one-size-fits-all brokerage. They don't take on tons of clients. They don't have 500 listings, or an individual broker doesn't have 20 or 30 listings. They handle a handful of them during the course of the year. In America, and you're based here, you have business brokers and investment bankers, depending on the size deal that you want. It's really a case of reaching out to them individually, as we talked about earlier, because the terminology here is a little different, but it's reaching out to the brokers who will keep you in mind when something comes online into their stable or their briefcase full of listings. And so it really is a case. Some will be helpful, others won't. I mean, there's brokers who, once you decide you don't want to go forward with them on a deal, you never hear from them again. There's no follow-up. It's just pervasive in the industry. Unfortunately, and Scott, take a good lesson, because that could separate you from a lot of the group, the level of professionalism. But it's really just pounding away, Troy. So if you find in your area, where are you located, by the way?
Austin, Texas.
Austin,
Texas.
Not Austin, Texas. Thea can help you out. So there's one broker there. She's been around for years. I've read a lot of her articles. She's really, really comes across very smart. Barbara Taylor.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's her name, but I got an old brain. Barbara. If I got an old brain. So if I had a brain fart, let me know and I'll dig up her name, because she sent me some communication over the year. And so if you go to someone like that, she's been around for years, right? And so to me, the distinguishing factor between the brokers, the ones that have been around for years and formulated a good practice and are not just a general mill of having 50 listings each, those are the ones that I would term as boutique, more boutique, in line with what you see in the UK. Because they're handling, like Scott will probably handle 4 or 5 transactions. You're not looking to take on 35 listings and be all over the place, just meaningful listings. So the other way to look at that is if you're looking to buy a business in your general area, go on to bizbuysell.com or businessesforsale.com. Go into search by your geography and click through, and you'll see the different brokers that are there. And by and large, you will find ones who do deals at this size or this type, and the ones that seem to have more robust information on their listings themselves, like it's more detailed. Those are typically going to be the better brokers, because the other ones just throw crap onto the online listings and they pray that someone's going to call them. So that's another way to potentially weed out who's like at the upper tier of the brokerage.
Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure. Mohammed's on the call. For anybody else, or you want me to start running through some? Oh, go ahead, Rodrigo. Nice to see you, man, from Canada, in Montreal.
Hi.
In
Hi,
Montreal.
everyone. Yes, from Montreal.
Well, the Canadians are out of the playoffs now, so
Yeah,
I took my Canadians jersey. That's
Yeah, I
now
can see
hidden
that.
behind the Buffalo Bills jersey, which is perfect timing because the NFL draft today or last
Yeah.
night. So that's what you see going forward, and that'll take us through till hopefully the Bills will be in it till February. So see what happens.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Richard and Sia, for your time and for the webinars. They're great. I just have a quick question. I don't know if I missed it from past webinars. It's related to brokers as well. I've been reaching out to them, and some of them are very open, but others, they ask right away, Okay, so you're looking into which industry? Are you fully funded?
Yep.
I have some investors that are interested on a deal by deal basis, but nothing concrete as of a letter or anything like that. How should I approach those brokers? Should I go straight and say I'm fully funded, even though I probably don't have at that time something to show them? What do you recommend? How should I approach them?
Okay, so it's a great question. It's a common question and it's a common challenge. Actually, next Wednesday, we're going to be discussing this specifically. However, here's what you need to be doing. You have a pool of prospective investors that are going to look at it on a case-by-case, deal-by-deal basis. And so what I have done in the past and strongly recommend that you do is regroup with a couple of them that you have the best relationship with, or at least at your perception of your best relationship with any of them, and say to them, here's my dilemma. Don't know if I put the cart before the horse or the horse before the cart, because I'm going and I'm meeting these businesses and I perceive that they're type of businesses that I'm going to be able to bring to you as a prospective investment. And I can't get the information until the point that I can prove the financing. And so what I need, first of all, I want to make sure we're aligned in what we're looking for in a business, but I need to get some sort of letter, a non-binding letter, something to the lines of the ones that I've used in the past were along the lines of the following. We are, it's on their company letterhead. We are aware of and are willing to finance Rodrigo Rojo in his acquisition of a business, typically up to around an X amount valuation. Please understand that this letter is not a commitment in any way, shape, or form, but to acknowledge the fact that if the business makes sense for our investment criteria, we will strongly consider financing him. And so if you can get that from 2 or 3, even better, okay? So your second part, if you don't have the financing, don't tell brokers that you do. Okay, because very simple, it's not the right way to do business. And I'm not accusing you of suggesting that you would do that. You just don't want to do that. Okay, because first of all, it's not it's not accurate. And the second thing is, if you do that and you go along the lines with a broker and you're investigating a business, and then you realize you can't get the funding, right? Brokers talk to each other. That's it. For that broker, you're dead forever. Okay, you're dead to me, right? Like is the way you're looking at it, and you're dead forever. And so just, this throughout this whole process, and it's hard sometimes when you don't have, when they ask you questions like, well, a couple of things that we're talking about in next week's webinar, when the seller says to you, do you have operational experience? Do you have money? Do you have a track record? Do you have experience dealing with employees? And it's like, no, I'm new at all of this. Like, how do you answer that? But we're going to tell you how to answer that. But you want to be completely straightforward and transparent. And if you go to these investors in a way of a very benign letter, you will get the letter. And I'll tell you another thing. If they don't give you the letter, they're full of shit. So don't worry about it. Go find another investor, because you're making it so benign that there's no exposure to them. Pardon my French, everybody.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you.
Of course.
Good to see everybody.
Always a pleasure.
Is it okay to follow on from Rodrigo's question though, if Emily doesn't mind? All I was going to say was, I like to think outside the box, and that we say that cash is king, as we all know. Wouldn't it be great if, I don't know if we can maybe do a webinar on this, Richard, just a thing that's come to my mind. What would be the best way, rather than do a search for them, to get? I've got a few associates that just got from scratch, have got anywhere between 10 to 20 million to play with. So they can go to a broker or a listing, or
circulate their contact information to everybody on the call.
I'm a first of the queue. I'm trying to get in there. But is there a way or a method where we can say, well, we can get investor funding without going down the private equity route? Is there a way we can do that?
Of course. I mean, and it's a big part of it. And you have to be, it's not even a huge extent of thinking creatively. It's looking at this and say, okay, I want to buy a business. You have confidence in your management or operational ability. You have this need to buy a business, a desire and hope and all those wonderful things. And then you got to get the money. In America, we have the big advantage of an SBA program. And Deb Curtis, the Right Honorable Deb Curtis, who's sitting on the call, she's the SBA guru. but in other parts you don't, or there's businesses that don't qualify, or there's the individual that doesn't qualify. But if you have a pool of prospective investors, especially if this is your first business, and I just had this with a client today on the call, the goal is to get into the business. The deal may not even be perfect. That investor may want majority control. Well, face the facts, folks. You may not even be in a position to negotiate. If the goal is to get into a business and they maybe earn more equity over time, well, if you can line up the money wherever it may be, friends, family, other investors, get the funding. Get the funding. And you've been on a bunch of these calls, Manoj, and others as well, and especially in the universe now of everybody calling themselves, you know, a search funder or a searcher. I mean, it's even a poorly applied word. I will venture to say that 80% of the people in that whole universe have no funding. And that's why 90% of the people who begin the search to buy a business never complete a transaction. There's other reasons as well, but that's a big part of it. So when you look at this, it's like, you know, sometimes you hear these stories of people, they start a business, turn this great thing, and they borrowed their credit cards and maxed out their cards and start a business. I'm not suggesting that you do that. I'm suggesting do the rational existing business approach to that, which is any pool of investors that you can get the money. Okay, don't spend your time looking for the perfect investor deal. Or had someone recently say, there's no way, how much equity should I give up for an investor? Well, what do you mean, how much equity? What's the deal look like? How much are they putting in? I'm not going to give them more than 10%. I said, well, guess what? Go get a job. Because if someone is going to write a check for all the money and take all the risk, they're probably going to want control. You may have a mechanism to get it, but the goal is get the money. Don't put yourself into a terrible situation and you want to negotiate the ability to potentially buy them out or buy more or acquire more equity through performance. There's a lot of ways to structure it, but the bottom line is you want to get the money. You got to get the investor, and that's going to separate you from, I said, probably 80% of the people that are looking at, you know, 80% of the other business buyers. And another note, by the way, for all the people, I was just thinking about this as we were talking, that whole idea of being a searcher and a search funder. If you're not a funded searcher in the traditional sense and model, which is someone underwriting you, paying you while you do your search and then going to fund it, you're not a searcher. The whole concept makes no sense to me. You're a finder. That's what you are. That's what you got to, the way you look at it. You got to look at it like you're a finder, because if not, the search mentality is they're searching for everything. They're searching for lenders. They're searching for businesses. They're searching for everybody. Be a finder. But to come back to the original point, whatever it takes to get the money, get the money. You just don't want to put yourself in a terrible position. You want to get your entrepreneurial world started.
No, that's perfect. But I better get the pitch deck out then and update it.
But it's good to have a good network. I mean, and you really got to keep working at it. And Rodrigo, to your earlier point, those investors or people that express interest certain time, you've got to stay in touch with them regularly. Maybe you have been, but make sure you keep in touch with them, all of them, because you never know when a deal is going to surface. Similarly, they may come across something and they're betting on the jockey. They're not betting on the horse. They're betting on you. And so versus the business, that's the jockey, not the horse. So you want to keep them up to date about what you're doing. Make sure your interests are aligned, what they're looking for in a business, so that when you do come to them, they'll be ready to write a check. So all of those things, it's keeping this whole, you know, spinning the plates like they used to do on the old Ed Sullivan show, which is way before most of your time, but you know, keeping all the balls in the air. Okay, I'm not, any other questions? Because I have a few that I can happily go through if you'd like. Maybe it'll trigger something. Bob, any questions? You're very observational.
Just enjoying listening to the conversation. Getting to the jockey and horse analogy, how would you go about vetting a searcher if you were considering investing in something they found?
It's a great question. So one of the things is a large part of this world, they have no track record, zero experience, never operated a business, a great degree, and no knowledge, right? So it becomes very challenging. I would first be I would want to look at a couple of businesses that they bring to me. And I want to understand, because I've been in the same situation, and they typically come to you with the idea, which is, this is the business that I want to buy, right? And they bring you the package. And I want to know from them, how did you get to that decision? I don't really care about what they concluded. I want to understand how they got to that decision. And what I would do, I've always found it very helpful to get the deck that they're going to present to me, not their investor deck to you, the actual deck that they used as the basis for bringing the investment opportunity to you. Because they want the money. So sometimes they miss stuff or they're just not well versed in it. So I would take the original deck, which is the seller's deck.
Yeah.
And I do an analysis of that on my own as though I was the buyer. Because more often than not, if you're going to be potentially funding searchers, you've gone through this dance before, right? You get it. So I would want to look at that, and then I want to see how they interpreted that deck. That to me is critically important. The other thing that I always look for is their growth projections. Because anybody who doesn't start off with zero growth projections, I never finance them.
So if they're not showing growth projections, you wouldn't finance them.
If they're showing immediate growth projections, I will not finance them.
Yeah.
Because I want to see a year where, it's like you have done nothing in your life related to running businesses. Zero. You have no track record. You got to be out of your mind, right? To think that you're going to be able to do this. It's going to take you at least a year. It's going to take, it'll take you a week to figure out how to turn off the alarm. So anybody who puts in growth projections for year one, I shred. So those are really the two starting points. And then the other point after that is spending a lot of time with the individual to understand how they think, because we don't have the benefit when we're making these investments of knowing how do they deal with people, how do they deal with situations. Are they going to be the type, if the going gets tough, what do they do? So, it's hard because you're betting on them as an individual, and the more time you spend with them, and if you've been in this universe a little while, you got a good measurement of people. So those would be the three things, which is, reading the deck, do your own version, compare and contrast that to what they write up, see what's in there, the growth piece, and of course the, spending a lot of time with them.
Do you think their independent sponsor fees is really skin in the game? If they're willing to put their deal fees back into the equity stack, capital stack?
100%. Look, if they don't have their cojones on the line, they got nothing to lose.
Right. And that's the thing. They want to put, they're claiming they're going to put their deal fee back into the capital stack, but that's almost like free money because they're getting the deal fee from the investors.
Well, it is the deal. It is free money, except you could other way to look at it, say it's normally money they may have taken if they did it somewhere else. It's still not money that they're going to put into their pocket. If they have the wherewithal, financial wherewithal, meaning they have some capital separate and apart from their deal fees, then yes, you want to see them put some money in. There's other individuals that may be phenomenal potential operators and they just need a break. And so in those cases, it's, you got to take a shot sometimes and go with your gut, and you meet some younger individual that you like, and you got a fire in their belly. And I don't know about you, but to me, it's like they remind me a little bit about me when I was a little younger. And then I sort of take some of the logic and I do it on gut. I mean, that's just the reality.
Exactly. Thank you.
Of course. So let me bring up one question that came up this week, and I'll run through, maybe it'll trigger some other questions, which was, one of our clients was looking at a deal and the seller it packages as an asking price plus the cost of the inventory. It wasn't retail. Retail or a restaurant very often is packaged as price of the business plus inventory, which you measure up or count again on the date of closing. And this wasn't the case. So what we were trying to explain to the seller till they finally understood, and for buyers, it's really important to understand, sellers can configure the deal any way they want. They could say they want this, plus they want inventory, and we've talked about, you never want to pay attention to the seller's asking price because most of them are smoking crack. And so, but the aggregate of the total has to fit within the parameters of a multiple that makes sense. So if they want to have, well, you pay for the assets, you'll pay for the inventory, and here's the valuation we want paid on a multiple of income. It's all wonderful. Yeah, terrific. No problem. Any way you want to do it is my attitude, but it has to fit within the box. And so conceptually, when you buy an existing business, the idea is you are buying a going concern. So that in theory, and what I've been teaching and preaching for way too many years, is when done right, you get the keys to the business on Monday, you take a paycheck on Friday. And so it's a going concern. A seller has to include an optimal level of inventory to sustain the business status quo the day after closing as it was the day before. And so that inventory has to be included. We had a situation recently with a seller who said, well, I normally carry $2.5 million of inventory, but because of COVID, I over-ordered and we keep over-ordering. And now we're at $3.5 million of inventory. So over and above the purchase price, we want the $1 million differential back. Okay. And I'm listening to this and say, okay, your sales were 12 million before. Then you started carrying all this extra inventory and you've bumped up your sales to 15.5, 16 million. How do you think you got there? If you were still carrying $2.5 million of inventory all the time, you wouldn't have been able to support more sales because you couldn't turn over ordering it quick enough. And so no, that inventory level that you have generates the revenue that you're basing the profits on and the valuation of the business. So there's that situation, because that's what the level of inventory that's going to require to run the business status quo as an ongoing business. Now, similarly, you get to good and resaleable inventory, which has to be defined as inventory that you can turn in X period of time. But you sometimes get into danger where, for example, smaller businesses, especially when you get into parts businesses, and they have, we're known that we have a part. If someone walks in here, I was looking at an acquisition of commercial washers and dryers in Southeast Florida. It was Maytag distributorship many, many years ago. It was actually the genesis for how I wrote the course. But the guy said, oh yeah, if someone walks in here and has a washing machine from like 1947 and needs a belt or something, we'll have it. They said, well, that's great, but how often does that happen? But they wanted all this extra inventory paid for at wholesale value. And so, well, if you look at the other side of the equation, how much do you sell of each part in a year or in 18 months? And so, and the sellers don't want to get stuck with inventory. And so they actually ended up having to reduce, there's a whole bunch of free inventory, if you will. But the concept here is the inventory, the whole price of the business, plus the inventory and all the assets have to fit into the multiple range, whatever that may be, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, whatever it is. It's the whole package together because the buyer is acquiring a going concern. Okay, is there any questions on that? Because it sometimes gets complicated in the eyes of the seller, not the buyer. And you don't want to be giving in on that. It's you're entitled to that right level of inventory. Okay. I want to talk about work in progress another time, but it was similar to this business. It was an asset heavy business. And I've seen cases of 3 of these in the last 2 weeks where and Scott, you'll want to pay real attention, close attention. As a buyer, you'll know this. When brokers or intermediaries do their recasting, their adjustments, and they do the pre-tax earning plus the owner's salary, perks, benefits, etc., they add back the interest, they add back the amortization, they get to that number, and they add back the depreciation. Well, if it's an asset-heavy business at all, you've got to offset depreciation with capital expenditure allowance. You can't just add back depreciation and not save money for a rainy day, as God bless my 93-year-old mother who'd been telling me for all these years, save your money for a rainy day. You have to put money aside to replace that equipment. That's the first part. So whatever that number is, has to be adjusted downwards to replace that equipment. That's number 1. Number 2, if you don't have a fundamental understanding of an asset-heavy industry that you're looking at, here's what you need to do. Don't rely on the seller's valuation for the assets or its remaining useful life. You have got to hire an expert in the industry to evaluate that equipment. Companies do it reasonably inexpensive. I've always referred to these people as my number 1 draft pick in the industry to help mentor me through a deal or guide me through a deal. When I worked for my years and was partners with the Dalio family office and Ray Dalio, they have a great term. They call it believable parties. I even like that term even better because that just hits it. You want to associate yourself with believable parties. And so if there's asset heavy business, there's always consultants in the industry. One way to find them is Pretty much every industry or version thereof has trade associations. The trade associations have websites, and almost all of these websites will have separate listings for consultants and resources within the industry. Just call a bunch of them. A lot of them will help you at the beginning for free or give you some pointers, but they may be the person you end up potentially even hiring as a consultant. But to analyze the quality of the equipment, to determine the replacement cost, its useful life, etc., you don't listen to the seller. Because what they have on their balance sheet has no representation whatsoever about the real world related to those assets. Any questions on that? Pretty straightforward. Good. Okay, I'm just trying to go through a couple of them. Oh yeah, here's another one also. They just some helpful hints, because there's a real crackdown on this and has been for a couple of years, and a lot of sellers are still doing it. Anybody that they have that's paid in their company, I know we're jumping a little all over the place, but anybody who they have in their company that's paid on a 1099 basis, you have to make sure they're a legitimate 1099. For many, many years, business owners look to skirt the withholding taxes and their contribution by deeming everyone to be a 1099. The IRS has really cracked down on it. Most people don't qualify. I mean, you can't even give them orders. It's very specific criteria. They can't have to be forced to submit reports or provide, be at the office full time. There's even some piece that they're not even responsible for the outcome. They're only responsible for the work. So if you see anything where there's 1099s, you need to investigate it, number one, to make sure they're true 1099s. The second piece to that is understand those individuals, if they are going to be converted to W-2 employees, they are going to cost you more money, because you have the withholdings, possibly benefits, etc. So 1099s, when you go through payroll costs or whatever, and some businesses put the 1099s in their expense line of payroll. So the question is, do you have anybody in a 1099 relationship, and understand that relationship? Okay. And if you go to like the IRS website, not that you want to spend your time on the IRS website, but if you go to the IRS website, you'll see and look at 1099s, you'll see the criteria. It's pretty rigid. My guess is the vast majority of businesses that have people on 1099s outside of external contractors, they don't qualify. Okay, one last thing that I wanted to cover up, because again, this stuff that came up this week, NDA issues. Non-disclosures. Has everybody who's looked, I know Manoj for sure, has everybody here, show of hands, whatever, everybody signed an NDA on business yet? Okay. So with NDAs, and especially for the newbies or people that are new at this, NDAs are very standard. There's a certain set of information that by and large cross sections every NDA, unless you're dealing with a competitive situation, buying a competitor. But by and large, they're pretty much the same. It's the protecting the disclosure of confidential information. But a couple of things to think of at the lower market when you're dealing with business brokers, because it's quite common. A lot of the brokers have a clause in there that you are automatically bound by this NDA for any business they show you, which in theory makes sense, right? I mean, everybody will agree. The problem is, if they don't show you that specific business and think they showed it to you, or you end up finding that business through someone else in their office or another broker, they go after buyers and say, hey, I showed you that buyer, I showed you that business first, you owe me commission, even though the seller is going to pay commission. So you want to have in the NDA a couple things. Don't sign blanket ones. That's rule number one. Meaning every NDA should be for a particular business. If they want to use the same NDA for multiple businesses, add an exhibit or an appendix, and you tack on each business as you see it. Not that it just happens to be in amongst their listings. So that's really, really important. For the first 2-3 NDAs that you sign, if you want to run them by an attorney for review till you're comfortable, and certainly for our clients who have, of course, how to buy a good business at a great price, send them to me. I'm happy to read them. Much to the dismay, I keep mentioning my mother, but much to the dismay of my mother, I'm not an attorney, but as you spend more time speaking with more and more attorneys, you realize that you're probably smarter than all of them combined. But I'm happy to look at all of the at the NDA. If you have any questions, send it to me and I'll scour them. If there's anything that concerns me, I'll tell you. You may have to see an attorney, but very rarely. But I'm happy to review them for you. And of course, you never get charged for any of that. The other part of it, which is it's become more robust recently, and especially within the world of searching, is this idea of who you can disclose to, because it typically protects you and those that are individuals, your accountants, attorneys, advisors on a need to know basis. That's typically the verbiage. But what is omitted from a lot of these now is the lending component. And so you want to make sure that there's information there that covers potential lenders and financial advisors. For example, let's say you're looking for an SBA loan, and you decide to use Deb Curtis's phenomenal services and reasonably priced, they may add, but you decide to use Deb's services. Well, in some NDA, she may not be covered, and you may having a conversation with her. Now, there's a fiduciary responsibility when she takes that information and presents it to lenders, but they go back and then the deal doesn't go through, and then all of a sudden they're pissed at Bob and they're pissed at Deb, and say you guys disclosed information. So make sure that the verbiage related to financial advisors and potential lenders is in that verbiage as well. And you can add them. Most brokers don't want to change them, but when you offer them good changes, they're fine. And so that's fine.
Hey, Richard, can I ask
yes,
a quick question before you move on that?
of
So are
course.
you having your advice, like if I was signing an NDA with a potential seller, am I then asking my advisor to sign NDAs, or advisors and lenders signing NDAs? So how, even if I sign it with a buyer, how are lenders?
Okay,
under that NDA?
so you're saying if you sign it as a buyer with a seller, right?
We're talking about brokers. Never mind.
No, both, because you
okay.
might try. No, it's a good question, because you may see them directly from sellers as well, or from brokers, right? It's an NDA is going to be an NDA, but no matter who it comes from, you want to make sure that it'll include verbiage in there that allows you to disclose what is deemed to be confidential information to your financial advisors or potential lenders. Because typically, and especially the older ones, and some of these people have been using the same NDA for years, it says employees, accountants, attorneys, advisors. You want to make sure it includes that line of financial advisors. That's whether or not you sign it with a broker or whether or not you sign it directly with a seller. The brokers sometimes are a pain in the rear end, saying they don't want to modify it or whatever. Say, well, I've got to have that language in there. It's I'm not going to get my financial advisor to sign one. They just haven't updated it because it's more common over the last 3 to 4 years, but I still see them almost every day that they don't have that line. And especially like in Bob's situation, right? If you're going to be funding someone potentially to acquire a business, well, you don't want to start signing NDAs with every one of the searcher's targets. You're a financial potential lender or financial advisor. And so he has to be covered as well. And you want to be able to take it to the to the people that are going to be involved with you in the deal, potentially.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
That can be a deal killer for a searcher trying to find investors if you have to have them sign an NDA constantly, especially if it's a larger investor. A lot of times we sign NDAs and not really read them, but you go to a larger investor and they're like, oh, our law department wouldn't let us sign this. And now you're caught up in all of that.
It's exactly correct. When my M&A work, and I only do a few deals a year, keeps me energized and busy and in the hunt. And so, work 3 to 5 deals, and typically like $2.5 to $7.5 million of EBITDA as a sweet spot. But when I deal with the institutions, it's amazing how many times you send out the NDA, and this NDA is be signed by companies that have $1 billion under management, and you get 12 other people in PE firms will send you back and they paper it to death, right? They got like 32 comments in there. So I mean, it's like it's ridiculous. And so you want to get the keys here is you want to get comfortable with them, understand that they all follow general conditions that are common across the board to all of them. Be aware, read them all. Don't just sign an NDA. Read them all, because you're going to be in the hunt. You're speaking with other sellers. There's other buyers. Brokers are protective. Sometimes they can get crazy. So always read them. After a couple of them and with a little bit of guidance, like I said, happy for any of our clients, send them to me. I'm happy to spend time going over them with you. After you read 2, 3 of them comfortable, you'll be able to recognize which ones have something in there or don't have something in there that you need. Let's see. Last thing here is if buying a business with property. And I think it becomes more frequent in the UK, freehold, leasehold, all that type of stuff, all that verbiage, right? Menage, freehold, leasehold. Okay. So if you have a business that involves property, the first determination to make is, does the business need that particular property to operate? Meaning, if it's a basic industrial building, it doesn't necessarily need that unless there's all kinds of wiring and plumbing and whatever put in to equip it to do that. Or if you're buying a gardening nursery, well, you can't relocate it, right? It has to operate there. And so if the owners own the property, the only way you're going to be able to operate that business is with that property. But when you go through the process of looking at a business that has property and the seller wants to sell the property, there's a couple things to involve. Number one is just make the determination that we just discussed. Does it need that property? The second thing is you have to value the property and the business independently. Okay. Completely independent. And because typically there's much harder rules, when I said harder set rules for property appraisals and professionals appraisers who do it, and you don't want to mix the two. You may end up mixing the two when you do the purchase price allocation, because sometimes it helps with lending, but for your purposes, you want to value them completely separately. I had one recently that the business throws off $200,000 a year, $180,000 a year, and they have a piece of property, and it's like $1.8 million. And we started calculating, and the buyer, and I think that when we worked out the numbers, that the adjustment weighted to the hit that the business would take, because they weren't charging market rates, the buyer was going to make about $12,000 a year. Okay, so it's completely, they had a business. They didn't have a business worth anything, that property. So the first thing, carve them out separately, value them independently. The second thing to look at is making sure, if there's property coming with the business or part of it, to make sure that the current owner of the property has been charging the business the right rent. Because you may not buy the property, but if suddenly the owner is out of the business and they say, well, we were charging $100,000 a year to my own company to pay the rent, but that market rate is now 200. Well, you got to adjust the earnings downwards by $100,000. Similarly, if you buy the property, you have to do the exercise to see what the additional costs are going to be: mortgage, taxes, insurance, and maintenance, depending on the lease. So you have to really evaluate it. You also have situations where the opposite holds true. An individual owns a business, they also own the property. They start overpaying themselves rent so that they can pay down build up the equity in their property quicker. And in that case, you would add that back, because now they say, well, we were charging the company $300,000 in rent, but market rate is only $200,000. Well, you'll have an extra $100,000 in the business for your use. So rules are: carve them out, value them independently, and look at what the impact is of servicing that debt or paying that rent. Is it or is it not market rate, etc., and make the adjustments accordingly. So I think those are a bunch of questions that I had from this week. I hope anybody else have any questions? I got all afternoon. I only have to pick up my wife at 5 o'clock. So you could, that's it. And I better be on time. She's never on time, but I better be on time. Irene, you're laughing. Last week, we were going out, she's getting ready, and she runs a title business, incredibly successful title business. She's manages the office for Knight Barry, which are huge in Wisconsin, and Deb would know. She managed the office in East Boca Raton, Florida, does an unbelievable job. But she, outside of work, never on time. So we had, last week, we were getting ready. I said, how long are you going to be? 5 minutes? She said, no, there's no way. She said, 10 minutes. I said, I'll give you 15. So I went downstairs and we were timing. My son and I got 4 kids. We were timing it. It was 40 minutes. Okay. And I said to her, how long do you think you work? She said, yeah, I know. It's probably like 3-4 minutes late.
My 6-year-old's the same way.
Your 6-year-old, you said?
My 6-year-old's the same way, right? You got to get out of the house.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, get out of the house in 5 minutes. So yes, it's the only thing. But I better be on time. That's the only thing I know, because then I have no more ammunition if she's late. So any other questions or can help you with anything? Yes, Deb, go ahead.
Hey, thanks. Thanks, Richard. Sometimes buyers that I've worked with over time, business brokers can be so difficult to want to share the tax returns, at least in the States here, unless they have an offer in. They won't share the tax returns. How do you get around that if the business buyer wants to know, how does this business qualify for financing if we can't see the tax returns?
It's a great question, and it happens frequently.
Mhm.
So, and not only the tax returns, sometimes you don't even get the detailed financials, internal
Right.
P&Ls, and they want an offer. So when they're being a real hard ass, and Bob, that would be less for you because this is really on the lower market. This happens quite a bit. So what I advise people to do is the following. The first thing is to tell the broker, look, we can go at this two ways. We can go at it your way, and here's what's going to happen. I'll give you an offer. The first contingency I have in the LOI is going to be you have to provide me with the tax returns. You're going to get the offer in, you may accept it, it will go back and forth. I'm going to bring those tax returns to the lender, and they may or may not be successful. They may not be accepted. In the interim, I've spent money on attorneys and accountants. You and your client are spending money on attorneys and accountants, and we may have run into a brick wall. So if you want to do it that way, I'll do it that way. There's no problem. And what I personally do and tell people in those cases, write a full price and terms offer.
Okay.
Then you give them no choice but to give you the documentation. Because you know what? You want to play games? We'll both play games. Because it's sheer stupidity. So,
Yeah.
and the first contingency has to be we want to get those documents. Now, if you have that as if they're willing to give them to you because of how you proposed it, great. If not, write the offer. Make sure within 3 days they get the documentation. I would tell the buyers, don't spend any money on accountants or attorneys outside of $500 to review the LOI. Okay, because you don't want to have to go into these great contingencies. You're just tying up the seller for a short period of time, and then bring them to someone like you. You know, it's hard sometimes to educate people, and they realize how ridiculous it is. Some brokers, their sellers say to them, "Look, I'm not giving anybody my tax returns without an accepted offer." So I get it. So sometimes you just got to play the games. Scott, I'll tell you for your own advice: qualify your buyers. Make sure they're sincere. Make sure they have the ability to get the money, that they have the wherewithal to get the finish line, and give them as much information as possible so that they could decide, so you don't waste your time with unqualified buyers. And sometimes you have to let them have the information, see how they digest it, but get them as much information as possible. It's a much more effective way to work. And I'm sure as a buyer, you probably wanted that. So you can make a good decision, because we want people to write LOIs that they're going to live with. I mean, that's the goal.
Is that LOI template in your course out
Yeah.
of curiosity?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
With those conditions, right?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about those extensively, like what happens if you have to submit if you're not getting the financials. I think, as a matter of fact, we're talking about that next week. If you have to get the financials, they won't give you the financials. Well, write an LOI, make it the first contingency. Within 3 days, you've got to give me the financials. Then they can go and get them, and that's it. I mean, it's stupid. I mean, it's crazy, but you got to sometimes play the game. I mean, that's the only way to do it. And keep in mind, sometimes, you know, you have brokers that have a listing. They know that they garner favor with their seller, bring them an offer.
Mm-hmm.
Shows them they're doing their job. So sometimes you just got to play the game. The better brokers won't act like that, because they don't want to waste their time negotiating an LOI. The financing contingency. But that's the way I've used it, got around it every single time.
Perfect. Good stuff. Thank you.
My pleasure, Deb.
Yeah.
And Deb, by the way, I'm going to let anybody know, anybody who's on this call, I think I mentioned before, but seriously, if you're going to go down the road of SBA financing, you got to speak with Deb. It's debcurtis.com. I have the blessing that every Thursday at 2:00 we do a live stream on LinkedIn, which is a lot of fun, and Sia helps us. But she's great. She's got the highest level of integrity you could imagine. So she's a wonderful person to deal with. And she didn't pay me to tell you that. I'm telling you, that's the truth.
Thank you.
No, that's brilliant. That's going to be really helpful, because I'm in the UK, but I've got SBA. I'm looking at 2 deals. One of them's quite meaty with the SBA. So I might need to touch base with you, Debs, on that one, if that's okay at some point.
Sure. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And Francesca, if you need any help in the UK, so I know UK based, just ask Richard to get my email address. If that's go Richard and see you. I'm more than willing to help.
Yeah,
Francesca, Manoj is like one of my prized pupils. We speak almost every week. I get deals.
Sorry about that, Richard.
No, I love it. And we have it down to such a terrific system now, because, you know, I like to read the decks as well. When the client sends me a deck, I go through it. Sometimes it's 50, 60 pages. It takes a couple of days or whatever. So now we have a system, because he looks at a lot of businesses. So we have a system. He gives me like the 10 bullet points, and he asks me to rank them on a scale of 1 to 10. So he'll send me like 2 or 3, and I go through the main bullet points. Sometimes I validate. It gives me the backup of the deck if I have to check something. And I tell him, this one's a 6, this one's an 8, this one's a 2, this is a 0, this one's an 11. And there you go.
Brilliant. It helps me. It helps me in my decision making as well. That's fantastic. Just on that, I've got 2 more in your inbox, so sorry about that.
No problem, baby. I'm good to go. That's what this is what I do all day long. You know what?
You like these? They're really meaty, lovely.
Good.
I don't want to get deal heat though, Richard. I don't want to get deal heat. Got to take the emotion out of it.
You got to take the emotion out of it. I had the conversation with someone today, one of our clients, and the way we do our consulting, oftentimes it's via email. So you get our materials. They're very robust, very detailed. We have questions along the way. So very often questions come by email because their clients like to have a record of our answers that we put right in the body of the email. But he was on the way he was looking at a business, and it's a really nice business. And some of you, I won't tell you who it is, but for those of you who've been on prior webinars, he's a regular, a very smart guy. And I'm not just saying he's smart because he bought our course. He's actually a really smart guy. And he was looking at a business, really nice business, and very unique, very different, very bland, very unsexy. The businesses that I like, make money under the radar and an opportunity to scale. And we were going through it today, and he had a great write-up. We worked through all the questions together. He went to meet the seller, or spoke to the seller, got all the answers, sent me the answers compiled, and did a fantastic job. And there was one problem, which is the business is located hours and hours away from his home. Hours and hours. And it was like, and he was talking about, I'm looking at this emotionally. I really like this, whatever. Logically, I don't know if this makes sense, whatever. And I said to him, well, that's why you pay us, because we bring the logic to the equation. And the reality was, I said, look, all the questions were great as we discussed the answers. You got all the great answers. I look at this in a couple of ways. If I was looking for a business, if I had the skills to run it, would I buy this business under the same terms and conditions? Or if I was looking at this business as representing someone, to say, would I recommend this to a very close friend of mine if they had the skills to run it? I said, I got to tell you, you can't buy this business. You're getting too emotional about falling in love with the business. It is not practical to think you could run this business from 8 hours away. It's a low number of employees. You don't have the operational experience. Mm-hmm. And if you have a couple of employees there, if one of them gets hit by a Pepsi Cola truck tomorrow, you're shit out of luck. Okay, you really see. Make a note to bleep that out. You're shit out of luck. I'll say it again, so you have double the work. And what are you going to do? You don't even have a huge pool of employees in that area, and you've got young children. What are you going to go spend Monday to Friday for the next 6-12 months to learn the business away from your family? I mean, that gets old really quick. And if you try to do it the way you're thinking of doing it, 1 or 2 employees leave, close the business, it's over. And so when you're talking about the emotion, I mean, I get it. I mean, you want to have a healthy combination of emotion. The 2 emotions you want to have during this whole process is you want to be excited and you want to be scared. You want to be excited because it keeps you motivated, and you want to be scared because it's going to force you to be diligent. So, I get the emotion. What's that?
A bank underwriter would love your comments, Richard, because no bank is going to finance that deal when the owner's 8 hours away.
No, there's no way. And unless you move there. I said, if you want to relocate for at least the next year and a half, move your family. I said, because it's going to be ridiculous to think that you're going to be away from your family Monday to Friday every week, because you know what's going to happen. If you have a problem on Friday, you end up staying there and going into the shop on Saturday. And so just think about it, that, no one should be willing to sacrifice family time for a business under any circumstances whatsoever, but certainly in that situation. And he said, and I was very appreciative, because he said, the emotion creeps in. So we'll keep you even. We'll give you a menage, give you a smack behind your head. We'll keep you even keeled. You have nothing to worry about. But emotion is a good thing. Just channel it properly. Make sure it's the right emotion that doesn't set you off making stupid decisions or big mistakes.
That's why you're on my team, Richard.
Honored to be here.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Keep them coming, baby.
Thanks, sir.
Because they say keep those cards and what do they say? Keep those cards and messages coming. Keep them coming. Yeah, I'm happy to look at them. We're down. We've got a good system now. We're running this like
we have, yes. And I tell you what, listen,
you're off.
That's the way I see it. It's like an executive summary.
Yeah.
So it helps you, because I know you've got so many to look at. So I think, well, if I can make your life easier, you can have
I'm all for that
executive summary. You'll know instantly.
Thank you.
To help make your life a little bit easier. Now, you're welcome.
Thank you. And I see Rashida just joined us, so I don't know if Rashida has any questions, because I apologize, but if I didn't see your name earlier, let us know if you have any questions, Rashida.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I actually came in a bit late, so I'm just listening in to glean all the wisdom that I can. So I appreciate just being able to do that.
Okay, and we're glad to have you. So that sums it up. Okay, we got hopefully everybody found this helpful. I sure hope so. And it's great to see everybody, and I thank you for your time as well. I love doing this stuff. I do this all day long with our clients. Hope you'll, for those of you that aren't following our material, I hope you'll join our community. We want to do more of these in our networking, and I think you'll find the value very helpful. We've got the webinar on May the 1st. And so we had the link in the chat, but also we have, if you go to richardparker.com, the main banner, you could register right from there. And I think that's pretty much what we had to cover. I see in the chat, there's 17 messages. Those are all covered. You're monitoring that like a Marine?
Yeah, I think you ran through all the questions. I think outside of Scott with the NDA, that was it for written. Everything else was me spamming everybody.
Perfect. Thank
Please
you,
like
everybody.
and subscribe.
Thank
Please
you.
like and
Enjoy
Yeah,
it.
so yeah, when you go to YouTube, hit subscribe. That's what they tell me to do. I'm not a social media guy, but that's what they told me to do. Bob, nice meeting you.
Nice to
And
meet you
everybody
too,
else,
Richard.
good seeing everybody
Have a
else.
great
You have a
weekend.
good weekend,
Thank you,
everybody.
too.
Speak soon. Cheers, Richard.
Enjoy.
Cheers. See ya.
Bye, Rashida.
Take
Next
care.
time, join us earlier. We'll answer all your questions. If you have anything, email me.